Welcome back, everyone, to Reading by Candlelight at Molly's Cottage. This year, there are two streams of the book boxes to choose from, the popular crime and thriller box and the new mixed box that showcases romance, general and historical fiction. And our very first historical fiction novel for 2025 is Claire van Ryn, author of Where the Birds Call Her Name, and it's featured in the March book box. Welcome, Claire.
Thank you. Such a pleasure to be here the second time round. Yeah.
Yes, long-time subscribers will remember that Claire's first novel, The Gorgeous, The Secrets of the Hugh and Wren, was featured in a Reading by Candlelight book box in August 2023. So maybe I should have said, welcome back, Claire.
Thank you.
Now, Claire van Ryn lives and writes in Tasmania with her beautiful family. She's worked as a journalist, magazine editor, communication specialist, and has her own content creation business, Inkling Media.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Now, Claire, can you give us a spoiler-free pitch of your book?
Sure. But what I thought I'd do, because I don't know if you find this, Fiona, but I find it's terribly hard to talk about my own books. It's funny, you go through this massive process of being immersed in all these words, and then someone says to you, so can you just tell me about it in like a sentence? And
Yeah.
suddenly you're completely stumped and you just don't know what to say. So I've been keeping an eye on Goodreads, as you do, especially at this early stage when some of the reviews are starting to kind of trundle in and you're kind of nervously going, what do people think about it? And I've been amazed at how these reviewers can just in this little kernel of information just summarize my whole book. So if you don't mind, I'm going to read what Karen said about my book. Is that all right?
Lovely. I want to hear what Karen said about your book.
Okay, so Karen says that Where the Birds Call Her Name is a gorgeous story blending fact and fiction, split in time and narrator between 1968 and 2023. We start with Saskia's mum, who is known both as Kiki and Greta in the historical chapters, who dies and leaves her caravan in her will, which on the surface makes little sense. And then Saskia discovers a journal more about her mum's teen years in Tasmania and a past that's never been spoken of. And then we jump to the 1968 chapters, so it kind of is a time jumping kind of novel. And Greta's 16th year in Stanley, which is a seaside village that actually exists in northwest Tasmania. And her life on the surface is typical, albeit filled with taxidermy. Her mum is a taxidermist. But inside her home, her household is full of secrets. And in particular, there's a trauma that is it's really the crux of the novel and is the reason for her leaving and changing the entire trajectory of her life. And so the narratives draw together and unfold as Saskia and her daughter travel in the caravan from their home in Broome to Stanley in Tasmania. So there we go. Thank you, Karen.
That's amazing. I love that way of describing your book through somebody else's eyes, because that's a really interesting process.
Yeah, it's really lovely to hear the way that different people interpret the plot, the characters, the themes. And certainly I always say that the reader is the final piece of the puzzle, the final part of the journey, and without them it just doesn't work, obviously. So it kind of makes sense to involve the readers in the journey. So thank you, Karen, once again.
I think I know the answer to this question because we spoke about this on your first Reading by Candlelight interview. Your family history and your great-grandfather were influential in the plot for this novel. What was it about this story that made you want to write it?
Yeah, so my great-grandfather was a taxidermist and preparator and collector of all kinds of wildlife. He worked with the Tasmania Museum and Art Gallery in the 1950s and 60s. And when I started researching him, I was just enthralled by his world. And in particular, I guess the item that that drew me into his story was a big diorama of wetland birds, wading birds, that lived in my grandparents' house when I was growing up. And it was in the lounge room. It was massive, like a big glass case. And it was intriguing. And I guess to begin with, I didn't realize it was a bit of an unusual accoutrement to domestic life, if you like. And as I came into my adult years, I was like a bit more like, what's that doing there? Who made that? And so I learned a little bit more about my great-grandfather who died before I was born. And there was never really very much said about him. So he was a little bit of an elusive character. And there are reasons for that I don't include in the plot line. And to be honest, I use this information and his real person as a springboard into the fiction of my novel. So it's not about him. There is like a little tiny cameo appearance, but actually his who he was informs the character I create in Greta's mother, Faye, and her occupation, and then also the juxtaposition of her dealing with death, with wildlife and decay and death, and her daughter being intrigued and interested, but also wanting nothing to do with it in a sense. And instead, she's drawn to the swampland, to the life, and to preserving life. So there's also just this slight bit of tension between mother and daughter in that relationship with the environment around them.
And as we know, your debut came out 2 years ago in 2023. And I remember our interview back then because you just started working on it. And did it take you very long to write?
So far, it seems that my books take about 9 months. They have a 9-month gestation. And
baby.
I know, it's funny, isn't it? I'm just starting my 3rd novel now, so I'll let you know how that goes. I guess I'm predicting that it might take another, 8 months and I might be there. But yeah, I don't really have a process per se because I feel like I'm still very new to this. But I guess like I've just described, I start with that kernel of an idea and I allow it to take me places, to unexpected places. I'm a bit of a pantser, and I both enjoy and am very uncomfortable with that. But I guess it kind of ends up working. So yeah.
And is it very different with your second book coming out? Does it feel different from when your first came out?
Yeah, I think yes, definitely. It feels very different because it's much more of a known quantity. I've been here before. It doesn't make it less exciting. If anything, maybe it's slightly more exciting. And even just the knowing that I'm no longer a debut. I'm no longer an unknown quantity. So there are people out there who already love my work, and who are already so beautiful and have pre-ordered and are coming to my events. And so I guess there's kind of this elevation of everything that I've experienced the first time. So yeah, it's still great. It's still just awesome.
And you were very lucky that, do you have the same illustrator, the same person who's done your covers? Because your covers are very similar. They're beautiful.
Yes, I do. Nikki has designed both covers, and she's just done such an amazing job of them. Yeah, kudos to her because she's just developed this kind of, I mean, you can see it on there, but it's just so much more beautiful with the little, when you see the little bits of foil as well. Nikki Townsend, so big shout out to Nikki because she's done a beautiful job with my books.
But this one's a bit special because you've got illustrations in this book, haven't you?
Yes. Yes, I would love to talk about that. So my friend Anna van Stralen, we've done some worked together before, but never anything quite like this. And as I was editing Where the Birds, I kind of had an idea to include descriptions of some of the significant Tasmanian bird life that I mentioned in the novel. So at the beginning of each of the 1968 chapters, there's a description of a bird, and it's accompanied by a line drawing of that bird, which Anna has beautifully depicted. And I'll give you an example. I mean, this won't. So the great eagle. Oh, actually, no, I'll show you the black swan, because I see black swans on your feed all the time, Fiona.
Yes, we do have
And
black
they're
swans.
so beautiful, aren't they?
Yeah, they're gorgeous.
Yeah. So she's done a line drawing of a
Oh,
black swan there. They're like
oh,
diving beneath the surface. I love the
that's
perspective she's given it.
gorgeous.
And so then you have like a bit of a description of the swan, its scientific name and its status. So each of the birds, you will know whether the status is secure, with the black swan, but some of them are unfortunately not in such a great place.
Okay.
But then there's a description, and the descriptions actually relate to something that happens or a character in the preceding chapter. So they're not descriptions that are there just for the sake of it.
Oh, wow.
They're descriptions that have some kind of, hook. So as an example,
Like plot markers.
yeah, a little bit like that. They
Oh,
might
that's
speak
cool.
to something about an attribute, in a particular character in the next scene, or it might be a bit more thematic or symbolic. Did you know, for example, that this was a little research kind of rabbit hole that I went down, and I was looking at the black swan and what it might have symbolized as a bird over the years. And so for about 1,500 years before the black swan was first encountered by European people, black swans were referred to as a kind of flying pig, as in something that did not exist, couldn't possibly exist, like it's a black swan. And of course, when they came, when Europeans landed and found these black swans, I guess there's just this sense of the impossible being discovered. So
Yes.
I just love that. Isn't that a cool, like, just little
Yes.
random piece of information? And it relates to something that happens in the next chapter. So yeah, a little bit of fun.
That must have been so much fun to do too.
Yes, definitely. I love bird life. So anything that involves researching or spending time in their company, I'm all for it. So yeah.
And landscape is obviously very important to you too. And I've read reviews that have described you as a wonderful ambassador for both Tasmania and its wildlife because of how beautifully you've written both your books. Now, what made you set it where you did?
Good question. I wanted to choose another place that was dear to me, because I guess it's easier to write a significant place that holds some kind of emotional or kind of, has a heart tug. So Stanley, I've never lived there, but we had a family shack at Helier Beach, which isn't far from there. And we would just always go to Stanley when we're at the shack. So we would go to Moby Dick's for breakfast, which was a little cafe there, and we'd climb the Nut, and we'd drive along the views of the Green Hills, and then convict barracks, the two beaches that kind of skirt either side. And yeah, it's just a place that had this kind of emotional tug. But also it's a place that is fiercely protective of its history. And there's a local history branch or an organisation, the Stanley Discovery Museum, that they operate on volunteer team, and they have this just wealth of information available. So obviously that made my job very easy.
Oh,
And so
yeah.
when I started digging into the place and its history and what was happening there in the late 1960s, I had all the information I needed to hand. And more importantly, at that point, when I started researching Stanley, I didn't have the Stanley wetland in the story at all. I had this big gap, and I knew that something kind of was needed. But when they told me about how, you know, it was people who lived it. So when they were kids, they would go to school, and after school had finished, they would run across the road. They'd grab, you know, their little rafts and spades and buckets, and they would go to this chain of lagoons, and it had clay-rich soil. So they would build little, you know, bowls and houses and what have you, and they would float their rafts on the waters, and it was prolific with bird life. And then in the 1970s, a permaculture group purchased the land, and they drained the wetland,
Oh,
and all the bird life left. So yeah, really, it's a really sad environmental story, but it's also a story that it speaks to the wider situation of our planet. Over the past 300 years, about a fifth of our wetland habitats have been lost because of this kind of treatment of the land. So it was just obviously meant to be a part of my novel, and to be able to speak into that space, but also to just point to the wonder of our beautiful creation all around us.
yeah. I mean, is that something you hope that readers will take away from reading this book, how important this is?
Yeah, absolutely. The importance of being good stewards of our land, of protecting what's kind of within our midst, but also to grasp what there is to gain from being observers, and just having our eyes open to the wonder around us. The epigraph in the novel it's very simple. It just reads, "Be like the birds," and that's actually taken from a Bible verse that reads a little bit longer than that, but it's just so simple. Like, live a simple life, you know. And that's the thing that Saskia is grappling with. Her life has kind of, you know, it's gone out of control. She's a teacher, and if anyone is a teacher who's listening, you will know
Yeah.
what a hard job that is. And my husband's a teacher, so I've written somewhat from experience, but not entirely. But I think also leaning into the learnings of COVID, and the fact that we use that time to reassess what's important in our life, and to kind of go, you know what, I can do without all the worry. I can do without all that stress, or I can live with less, or I
Yeah.
can, you know, I can I don't know, I can just pare things back so that my heart and my mind is settled, and and I can look out my window and pause and watch a bird in the tree and just go, wow, there's a bird and here's me, and all is good. You know?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Oh, I do, because we have so many birds here where we live. We live in a manufactured wetland. So
yeah,
a
cool.
wetland that has been created to give back. And so there are a lot of birds and swans here. And so, yes, that really speaks to me.
Awesome. That's
Now,
special.
Claire, did you have to now? So if you already had that research about the history and the place, did you have to do a lot of research about birds and taxidermy?
Yes, yes, I did. It's a rather strange thing to to look into. But I mean, it's interesting. I actually I pretty much have a blood phobia, so I didn't I didn't delve too closely. But no, I had the real privilege actually of visiting the Tasmania Museum and Art Gallery, their research facility in Rosny in Hobart, and the people there were able to give me not only a tour of my great grandfather's collection,
Wow.
things like little beetles or bugs that were actually you could pretty much not see them by the naked eye, through to water rats and ringtail possums and birds, of course, and just all sorts of things. That he discovered the first blue-banded bee and little moths and just everything. So that was a real treat. And I was also able to see just some of the process of a bird mid-taxidermy process. That's obviously the technical way of saying it. But I also just researched online, and ran it by the people at 𝐇𝐚𝐥𝐿. Belinda, who is in the zoology section, she was very helpful in that space. So yeah, it definitely required some research, which is a bit of fun.
And both of your books have birds in them in the title, but they're primarily about families, loss and love and secrets. And what was it that made you want to do family stories, but to include nature and bird life in them?
That's a good question. I think that I feel like I have fallen into these stories. They're stories that have come up out of me. And I don't, like, I kind of do know and I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
so like families, I mean, it speaks to our humanity, and I want my stories to really mean something. I really want people to take something away, and I want it to be hopeful. I could never write a novel that left you in despair. I can't do that to you. I want you to leave feeling uplifted, and like perhaps there's some application, to your own life and situation, or maybe there's an affirmation of an experience that you've had. So I guess that's why I write about family, and families are so complex and just stranger than fiction anyway.
Yes.
So um, and then the birds are just a theme that have been significant to me. And I know from the feedback I've had from different readers that they're significant to others as well. It's like in this novel, Faye actually Greta asks her mother, why are you so interested in birds? And Faye says, and Faye has a faith, and she says, for me, birds are emissaries. They're messengers from God. And so when a bird lights in a tree, it's telling me that God is with me, that I'm not alone in this situation. And when you read the book, you'll know that's a very significant thing. And whether it's a wren speaking to I don't know, that chirpy little cheeky kind of personality of a wren, through to a soaring eagle, and just the breadth of its wings, and just that knowing that strength and power in nature and in God, and in the way that might signify for her that he is watching over her. And then to something like the white-faced heron. Actually, I won't go there, because that's I can't talk to you about the significance of the white-faced heron, because you will discover that about halfway through. But anyway, all bird life, I feel, has this weight of meaning. And I think that if we search for it, we will find it. So yeah.
That's beautiful. I love that. And you have mysteries in your stories, because, there's secrets and things come out. And you use dual timelines and protagonists. Is that Does that help with hiding the mystery?
Uh, yeah, it does. It helps, and then sometimes you've got to be careful that it doesn't hinder,
Yes.
because I guess the challenge with writing dual timeline is that you can have your reader more engaged in one timeline than the other, and so there's this tug. All the time you're pulling your reader out of one and then plunging them back into the other over and over again. So you've just got to be really mindful of it and perhaps gentle with them. And the way that I've done that is by kind of sewing them into each other. So having these crossover points where you're kind of easing them out and then pushing them into the next timeline again. But yes, it does help to unfold the mystery, I guess, but also to have the mystery from the past speaking to the
Yes.
situation of the character in the present. So
I
yeah.
love I love dual timelines. They're my favorite books to read.
Is yours written dual timeline?
No.
That's
I know,
interesting.
interesting, isn't it? Now, we'd love to share what we're reading here at Reading by Candlelight. Can you share a book that you're enjoying at the moment or have just finished reading?
Yeah, I've just finished reading The Jam Maker by Mary Lou
Oh, yeah.
Stevens, and it is so good. She's just masterful at handling historical accounts and but then also bringing relevance to current, like modern kind of topics. I found it so interesting reading about Hobart's history on the waterfront there and the Wapping area and um, the Hobart Rivulet. And I guess these are all places that are familiar to me, and so reading a piece of fiction that feeds well that educates me is really appealing. But then yeah, the layering of the story is just beautiful. Highly recommend. Mm.
I think I spoke over to you. I'm sorry. That's The Jam Maker by Mary Lou Stevens, in case I did what I think I did.
That's all right. Yeah, no, that's it. I'm sure she'd love the little plug.
And last time I asked you this, you were working on this book. So can you tell us what you're working on now?
Yeah, it's very early days. I am working on another book. I don't think it's going to be dual timeline. It's looking like it's going to be more like yeah, jumping into the heads of a few different characters. It's probably so fledgling. I can't really say a whole lot about it, except that it is set in Tassie, and there are some natural kind of Tassie elements that I'm having fun playing around with. But like I'm literally 6,000 words in, and my head is just so buzzy and full with all the stuff around tour and this new release that I've just kind of said to myself, okay, you can kind of just have a little break and come back to it when things are not so, yeah, hectic.
Yes, very fair. So, as an author, do you have a piece of advice you could share with aspiring authors?
Um, I think my advice would just be to write often. I've kind of been mulling this over a lot, and I guess I I say to, I feel like I'm new to this, but actually I'm really not. I've been writing for a really long time, and all of that has sewn into where I am. And so, I worked as a journalist for 10 years, and then I've done communications kind of work for a long time. And so I've been in the position where my work has been my training ground. And so I guess, that's quite a privilege to have been able to do that. But it's been, yeah, lots of honing the skills, lots of time and just working on your craft and just getting lots of words down. So yeah, in essence, it's really hard work. And the way But that's the only way to achieve your goals, is to really put the time in. And so my writing group, we have this this aim that we set one another, and that is to write 5 minutes a day. So while it's a lot of hard work, if you develop a healthy habit, a healthy writing habit, then it can be achieved quite simply. So yeah, 5 minutes a day, people.
Love that. 5 minutes a day. That's excellent. Well, that's time on our interview.
That flew.
I know. Where the Birds Call Her Name will be published tomorrow on the 4th of March. So I especially want to thank you, Claire, for taking the time to speak with me only one day prior to publication.
Such a pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
And I also want to thank Claire and congratulate her on being Reading by Candlelight's first ever historical fiction book box author.
Yay. I hope you love it. If you choose to read it, then yeah, I hope you love it.
I'm sure they will choose to read it, because Where the Birds Call My Name is set in the breathtaking landscape of Tasmania's northwest, and it is a tale of family bonds, secrets, and betrayals, and it's set over 2 timelines, my favorite thing, and written in Claire's beautifully descriptive style that's going to tug at your heartstrings. And reviewers already have called it sumptuous and hopeful and heartbreaking, yet joyous. And I'm certain that the Reading by Candlelight subscribers and all readers will love your book.
Oh, thanks, Fiona.
And we'd love to hear what people think of it in the Reading by Candlelight Facebook group or on Instagram. And thank you everyone for coming along tonight and watching us live. If you're watching this on YouTube or listening to the podcast, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. And thank you again, Claire.
Thank you.
I'm wishing everybody happy reading, and goodbye for now.